It was supposed to be just another quiet night at home. My parents were away, the house was empty, and everything felt normal until I heard it. A slow, steady tapping coming from right below my bed. I tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it was the pipes or the house settling, but the sound didn't stop. It got louder, closer, more deliberate, like someone was down there trying to get my attention. The problem is, this house isn't supposed to have a basement. At least, that's what my parents told me. So when I found a hidden door under a pile of old boards outside, I knew I shouldn't open it. But curiosity's a dangerous thing, because once you open a door that was never meant to be opened, something on the other side might come looking for you. Welcome back to the channel. Hit subscribe and listen carefully. If you hear knocking tonight, don't answer it. It started just last week, during my final days at home before heading back to college. My parents were away on vacation, leaving me alone in the house for the first time. It was a quiet place, a little old but cozy, until it wasn't. The first night, I noticed something strange. It was around midnight. I was lying in bed scrolling on my phone when I heard it. A faint tapping sound coming from beneath the floorboards. Slow, steady, and weirdly rhythmic, like someone knocking from under the house. At first, I brushed it off as old plumbing or the heater kicking in. But the sound didn't stop. It went on for minutes, consistent, deliberate, wrong. I should probably mention something about this house. My parents had bought it right after I graduated high school. They called it their downsized dream home, and when they gave me the grand tour, my dad specifically said there was no basement, just a small crawl space for utilities. He sounded sure of it. So when I heard tapping from below, the idea that it was coming from anything other than pipes made my stomach twist. The second night, it happened again, only louder. Same time, same rhythm, same spot under my bed. I even turned off my fan, held my breath, and listened. Tap, 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 then silence, then dragging, like something heavy was being pulled across the dirt. I remember sitting completely still, my pulse pounding in my ears, thinking, there's nothing down there. There can't be, but the sound was real. Too clear, too close. By the third night, the noises had changed. The tapping became scraping, clawing. Sometimes it sounded like fingers, other times like nails raking wood. I wanted to believe it was an animal, maybe raccoons or something that got trapped, but deep down I knew better. Every sound seemed too intentional, too human. When it finally stopped, I didn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to start again. The next morning, I called my dad. He told me to check the crawl space. Probably a raccoon, he said. Grab a flashlight and take a look. I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed not to, but I did anyway. The entrance was under the porch, covered by a small hutch. When I lifted it, a wave of cold, stale air hit me. I shined the flashlight in and saw nothing. Just dirt, pipes, and silence. No animals, no movement, no sign of life at all. I closed it up fast, trying to convince myself that meant the problem was solved. But that night, the noises came back. Louder, angrier. I swear I could feel the floorboards vibrate with each hit. That was when I realized it wasn't coming from the crawl space, it was deeper. There was more space beneath the house than my parents knew about. The next morning, while checking around the outside of the house, I found something odd. Along one side of the foundation, a stack of old construction materials leaned against the wall, planks, tarps, a few cinder blocks. They looked untouched for years. I moved them aside, and that's when I saw it. A metal storm door, half buried under dirt and paint. The hinges were rusted, but it was clearly an entrance. An entrance to something my parents said didn't exist. My heart was racing as I pulled it open. The smell hit me first, damp earth and rot. Concrete steps led down into darkness. I should have closed it right then, but I didn't. I went down. The air grew colder with every step. My flashlight beam shook across the room, landing on things that didn't belong there: empty food cans, a dirty blanket, a plastic water bottle. Someone had been living there. Then my light caught something else. Carvings on the wooden beams, tallies scratched deep into the surface, hundreds of them, and strange symbols that looked like a mix of drawings and letters. They were crude, almost childlike, but violent. Figures of people and animals twisted into impossible shapes, their faces distorted. One pillar had a circle carved into it with dozens of slashes radiating outward, like a sun or maybe an eye. That's when I heard it, a whisper, faint from behind the far wall. I froze, the beam of my flashlight trembling in my hands. I told myself it was just the wind, or my imagination echoing back at me. But the whisper came again, soft, deliberate, like someone trying not to be heard. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the storm door shut, and locked it with the heaviest padlock I could find. That night, I barely slept. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to the sound of banging, this time from outside. It wasn't subtle. Someone was pounding on the storm door, shaking it violently. The sound echoed through the walls. I remember sitting frozen, heart racing, too scared to move. The banging stopped after what felt like forever. I forced myself to the window and looked out just in time to see a figure running across the backyard, disappearing into the trees. Tall, fast, and silent except for the crunch of gravel under their feet. The police came later, searched the basement, the yard, everything. They didn't find anyone. They said it was probably a trespasser, maybe a squatter coming back for their things. My parents rushed home the next morning, panicked, but trying to act calm. "It's fine," my dad said. "We'll seal it up, maybe fill it in completely." But I could see it in their eyes. They were terrified too. I left for college the next day, but I can't stop thinking about it. About what was living under that house. About the whisper that sounded too close, too human. And about one detail that won't leave my mind. The tallies carved into the wood weren't all the same size. Some were old and faded. Others looked fresh, like they'd been added just days ago. As if whoever made them hadn't gone far. As if they're still keeping count. It happened a few years ago, but I still think about it every time I drive that stretch of highway. Nothing ever happens out there, just miles of wheat fields and the occasional cluster of trees. I live a few miles from the Montana-Idaho border, where time moves slower and news spreads faster. The kind of place where everybody waves and nobody locks their doors. At least, they didn't before the car showed up. It was early morning, the end of August, when I first saw it, a pale blue sedan parked on the shoulder. The air was cool, still, and the sky that soft shade of gold right before sunrise. I remember because everything about that morning felt peaceful until I noticed the car. It was angled slightly toward the ditch, no lights on, no one inside. I slowed down just enough to glance through the window as I passed. Empty. The seats looked clean, no sign of a struggle, no belongings thrown around. Just an abandoned car sitting perfectly still, as if someone had driven it there on purpose and walked away. I didn't think much of it. Out here, you see strange things sometimes, broken down cars, lost hikers, the occasional prank. But when I drove home that evening, the car was still there. Same spot, same eerie stillness. Only this time, the driver's side door was wide open. I swear it hadn't been like that in the morning. Something about it felt wrong, like the world had shifted slightly between sunrise and sunset. I pulled over when I got signal and called the non-emergency line. I told the dispatcher about the car, the location, and the open door. She thanked me and said an officer would check it out. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the image in my head. That door hanging open in the wind, waiting for someone to notice. The next morning, the car was gone. For a few days, I forgot about it until the local news reported a missing person. The anchor's voice was calm, detached, but the words made my stomach tighten. Authorities are investigating an abandoned vehicle discovered along Route 28 earlier this week, she said. The registered owner, a man from out of town, never reached his destination. They didn't release his name. No sign of foul play. No leads. Just gone. Something about it didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the way the story faded so quickly from the headlines. Maybe it was how the police seemed so casual about it. But mostly, it was the feeling that I had seen the beginning of it all, that I'd been the first to notice. A week later, I called my brother, Benjamin. He's a firefighter in a nearby town. If there was more to the story, he'd know. They sent a memo about it, he said. Abandoned vehicle, possible missing person. The sheriff's office is handling it. I asked if there would be a search. He said probably, but they were waiting for clearance. I told him I wanted to help. At first, he laughed it off, but eventually he agreed to talk to his chief. By the weekend, we had permission to assist. Nothing official, just a handful of volunteers working alongside local law enforcement. The search area was a shallow wooded patch not far from where the car had been found. A tangle of brush, irrigation ditches, and uneven ground. The kind of place that swallows things. We split into pairs and started combing the area. I was with Benjamin, following the ditch line. When someone radioed in, we found something. Everyone converged on their location. It was an old maintenance shack, half sunken into the dirt, hidden by overgrowth. From the road, you'd never even know it was there. The door hung crooked, the lock snapped off. Inside, it was dark, damp, and smelled of rust. My flashlight cut through the dust, revealing empty water bottles, crumpled food wrappers, and a pile of torn fabric that might have once been a sleeping bag. Someone had been living there recently. One of the firefighters called us over to the back wall. "You need to see this," he said quietly. There, just above floor level, was a single hole. Clean, circular, and surrounded by splintered wood. Not from rot. Not from animals. A bullet hole. The officers confirmed it immediately. We searched the entire shack for casings, blood, footprints, anything. But there was nothing. Just that hole, like a silent accusation. The sheriff's tone changed after that. He ordered everyone to step back, then radioed for additional units. Within the hour, more patrol cars arrived. They told us civilians to leave the area. Benjamin tried to argue, but one look at the sheriff's face told us it wasn't worth it. The search was over. We were done. That night, I called Benjamin again. He said the firefighters had been dismissed too, and the scene was completely sealed off. They won't say why, he told me. They're keeping it quiet. Over the next few weeks, I waited for updates, news, reports, anything, but there was nothing. No follow-ups. No press releases. It was like the whole thing had been erased. Eventually, I decided to go back. I needed to see it again, to prove to myself it had actually happened. I drove down the same road, parked in the same area, and started walking. The trees looked the same, the ditches still cutting through the grass like scars. I found the spot where we gathered that day, but there was no shack. No broken door, no foundation, no sign that anything had ever been there. I walked in circles, certain I was missing it. I even pulled up old photos of the area on my phone to match the terrain. Nothing. The place was just gone. Not torn down. Erased. Like someone had dragged it out of existence overnight. I tried to come up with explanations. Maybe the county had removed it. Maybe I was looking in the wrong place. But even if they had dismantled the structure, there should have been something left, wood scraps, tire marks, disturbed soil. There was none of that. It was as if the land had swallowed it whole. Standing there, surrounded by quiet fields and wind through the grass, I realized how small I felt. How fragile. Whatever happened out there, I wasn't meant to see it. Maybe nobody was. Maybe that's why they took the shack away. Because inside that dark little building was something the world wasn't supposed to know about. Every summer since, when the air grows heavy and August starts to fade, I drive that road again. The fields never change. The sky still turns gold at sunrise. But every time I pass that spot, I slow down, just in case I see that pale blue car parked on the shoulder again, waiting for someone else to stop. It happened last August, during what was supposed to be a relaxing weekend alone in the wilderness. I'd been working nonstop, burnout, and thought a few quiet days in nature would clear my head. My dad used to take my brother and me camping every summer when we were kids. It became kind of a tradition, one I still tried to keep alive even after growing up. My girlfriend hates camping, so it's usually just me. I don't mind being alone. At least I didn't until that trip. I found the spot online, just a random clearing deep in the forest, not part of any official campsite. It looked perfect, isolated, peaceful, no crowds or noise. The kind of place where you could sit by a fire and hear nothing but the wind through the trees. I downloaded the map so I wouldn't get lost and started hiking early in the morning. It took me nearly 2 hours to reach the clearing. By the time I set up camp, the sun was high and the forest felt alive. Birds, insects, the occasional rustle of small animals. Everything seemed perfect. That first night was almost cinematic. I built a small fire, cooked one of those freeze-dried meals that somehow taste better in the woods, and watched the stars. The quiet was heavy but comforting. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a place like this to escape to. It didn't last. The next day, I decided to hike to a nearby river I'd seen on the map. It looked close enough, but the terrain was tricky, uneven ground, thick brush, and no marked trail. It took longer than expected. I spent most of the afternoon fishing, managing to catch one small brook trout, which I threw into a cooler for dinner. The light was fading faster than I realized, so I packed up and started heading back. I figured I'd make it to camp before sunset. I was wrong. By the time I was halfway back, the forest was already dim. The sun had dropped behind the trees, and the shadows stretched long and strange. Within 20 minutes, it was pitch black. My headlamp lit the path ahead, but the woods looked completely different at night. Every branch seemed to move. Every sound felt too close. That's when I saw the light. At first, it was faint, a small, flickering glow in the distance. It swayed side to side, like someone walking with a lantern or a flashlight. Relief washed over me. Maybe another camper had set up nearby. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. I called out, my voice echoing slightly between the trees. "Hey, you camping out here too?" I expected an answer. Instead, the light stopped moving. For a few long seconds, it hung there, completely still. Then, without warning, it went out. Total darkness. My heart started racing. I waited, thinking maybe they'd turned it off accidentally or were trying to find their footing. Then I heard it, the sound of someone running. Not toward me, not away from me, just around me. Branches breaking, leaves crunching, fast and chaotic. Whoever it was, they weren't stumbling. They were sprinting. I froze, my headlamp darting in every direction, but there was nothing there. Just the sound of footsteps fading into the dark. I forced myself to keep walking, moving faster now, trying to stay calm. I told myself it was probably some other hiker who got spooked, maybe someone who didn't want to run into a stranger in the woods at night. That explanation worked until I got back to camp. Everything looked exactly how I'd left it. My tent, my fire pit, even the small pile of wood I'd gathered earlier. But I couldn't shake the unease crawling under my skin. I ate a protein bar instead of cooking, crawled into my tent, and tried to read by lantern light. Eventually, exhaustion won and I fell asleep. I woke up sometime after midnight. No sound, no wind, just silence so deep it felt unnatural. I lay there, listening, unsure what had woken me. Then I realized I had to use the bathroom. I sighed, unzipped the tent halfway, and froze. Under the pale moonlight, I could see the clearing, every rock, every branch. And standing about 15 feet from my tent was a person. At first, I thought maybe it was another camper, but something was off. They weren't moving, not even swaying, just standing there, facing my tent. I couldn't see their face, just a dark silhouette, tall and thin. My body locked up. I didn't breathe. My mind raced through options, yell, run, hide, but none of them felt safe. I whispered, "Hello." No answer. "Are you lost?" Still nothing. Then the figure moved. Not slowly, not cautiously, violently. They sprinted straight toward me, faster than I thought humanly possible, screaming. The sound that came out of them wasn't human. It was this warped, high-pitched screech, like laughter and pain twisted together. I stumbled backward, falling out of the tent. The figure hit me full force, and we both went down hard. They clawed at my face, not punching, just scratching, like an animal. I could feel their nails dig into my skin, feel their breath on my cheek. I managed to grab my knife, slicing at their hand. They shrieked, this horrible, broken sound, and bolted into the trees. For a long time, I couldn't move. My face burned, blood dripping down my chin. I could hear something laughing in the distance, fading deeper into the woods. I stayed awake until morning, knife in hand, every sound making my heart jump. When the sun finally came up, I packed my things in record time and hiked out. I didn't stop until I reached my car. On the drive home, I thought about calling the police. But what would I even say? That I was camping illegally and got attacked by a lunatic in the woods? They'd think I was drunk or making it up. So I said nothing. I just went home, cleaned my cuts, and tried to forget. But forgetting doesn't work when something like that happens. Every night since, I've woken up at least once thinking I hear footsteps outside. Sometimes I dream about the scream, how wrong it sounded, like someone trying to imitate a human voice and failing. I still go hiking sometimes, but never alone. I can't, because there's one thing I can't stop thinking about. When that thing ran off into the woods, I caught a glimpse of its hand on. Sometimes I wonder if these stories are really separate or if they're all part of the same thing. Different people, different places, but the same darkness connecting them like threads pulled through the same rotten fabric. A basement that shouldn't exist. A car that shouldn't be there. A stranger in the woods who shouldn't be alive. Maybe it's all coincidence. Or maybe it's something worse. Something that moves between us, watching, waiting for the moment when we're alone enough to listen. When I think about the guy who found the basement, I imagine what it felt like, hearing something knock from under your floor when you're certain nothing's beneath you. The terror of realizing you're wrong. That maybe you've always been wrong. The tapping, the dragging, the whispers. And then the hidden door. What if it wasn't just a door to a basement? What if it was a door to somewhere older, somewhere forgotten, sealed for a reason? And when he opened it, maybe he didn't just find someone living there. Maybe he woke something that had been waiting to be remembered. Then there's the man on the highway, the one who saw the car, then the shack that vanished. His story haunts me because it feels incomplete, like someone ripped out the last few pages. There was a bullet hole in the wall, but no casing, no blood. The police moved in, then the building disappeared. That's not just bureaucratic cleanup, that's erasure. Whatever was in that shack wasn't meant to be found. Maybe it was connected to the missing man. Maybe it was connected to the symbols carved into the basement wood. Or maybe it was something much bigger, something the town decided to bury. And if they buried it, how deep did they have to dig? The last story is the hardest for me to shake. The man in the woods, alone with his tent and his knife. I can picture him sitting by the fire, surrounded by the kind of silence that only exists miles away from anyone else. I can almost hear the sound of that first branch snapping, the way his heart must have jumped when the light went out. The moment he realized he wasn't the only one out there. That scream, it's the same kind of sound that doesn't come from one person. It comes from all of us. From every ancient, instinctive fear we've tried to bury under logic and comfort. The scream of something that knows it's being seen. If you step back and look at all three stories, there's a pattern. A sound that starts small, tapping, a bullet, a footstep, and grows into something impossible to ignore. Each one begins with a warning, something easy to dismiss. And each one ends with something that can't be explained away. The basement door, the missing shack, the man in the woods, they're not random. They're connected by the same unseen force that hides in the corners of the world. The part of existence we like to pretend doesn't exist. Sometimes, late at night, I go over the details in my head. The tallies carved into the wood. The bullet hole. The dirt under that thing's fingernails. I imagine drawing lines between them on a map, watching those lines intersect somewhere in the middle of nowhere. What would be there? A town? A forest? A forgotten place where everything overlaps? I used to think horror was about monsters or ghosts, but I don't think that's true anymore. I think horror is what happens when the world stops following its own rules. Maybe these aren't stories about different people at all. Maybe it's the same darkness wearing different faces. Maybe it's testing us, seeing how far it can reach before we notice. It hides in basements, behind locked doors, in the gaps between the trees. It makes noises that sound almost human. It watches from places that shouldn't exist. And when we finally look back, when we finally try to find it, it disappears. Like the shack. Like the voice under the floor. Like the light in the forest. Gone, but not gone. The scariest part? It doesn't need to hurt you to get inside your head. It just needs you to remember. To think about it when you're alone. To wonder if the sound you just heard was the house settling or something beneath it. Because the moment you start wondering, it's already there. Listening, counting, waiting. Sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I hear faint tapping in the walls. I tell myself it's nothing, just the wind, just pipes, just old wood shifting in the dark. But every so often, the tapping changes rhythm. It syncs up with my heartbeat. Tap, 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 then silence. And I remember all those other stories, all those other people who thought they were alone. I think about the basement door, the empty highway, the tent in the woods. And I realize that maybe none of them ever really ended. Because the darkness doesn't need a reason to return. It just needs someone new to listen. When you really think about it, all these stories, no matter how different they seem, are about the same thing. What happens when you stop feeling safe in your own world? A normal night at home becomes a nightmare when you hear something beneath your floor. A quiet drive turns sinister when a car appears where it shouldn't be. A peaceful camping trip turns into a fight for survival when someone or something finds you in the dark. Each of them starts with a small, almost forgettable moment. A sound, a glimpse, a question. And then the world cracks open, showing you what's been hiding underneath all along. That's the thing about fear. It doesn't always come screaming. Sometimes it whispers. It taps once, twice, just to see if you'll listen. The moment you do, it knows it has you. It feeds on curiosity, on the human need to understand the unknown. That's why the guy opened the hidden door. That's why the man went back to find the missing shack. That's why the camper called out to the light in the woods. We all want to believe the world makes sense, that every sound has a source, every mystery has a reason. But what if some things aren't meant to be solved? What if they're warnings? If you ever find yourself in a situation like that, hearing something that shouldn't be there, seeing something that shouldn't exist, don't go looking for answers. Close the door. Walk away. Because once you start searching, it's already too late. You've invited it in. The thing under the floor, the missing man, the screaming stranger, they're not just stories. They're reminders that the world still has corners we haven't shined a light on, and that sometimes it's better that way. The darkness isn't always outside of us. It's in the space between our thoughts, in the moments we can't explain but pretend we can. It waits in empty houses and deep woods, but mostly it waits inside the mind. The more you think about it, the stronger it gets. The more you remember it, the closer it feels. Maybe that's why these stories linger long after they end, because a part of you recognizes the truth in them. So tonight, when you're lying in bed and the house creaks, don't listen too closely. When you see something strange out of the corner of your eye, don't turn your head. And if you hear a tapping sound from beneath your floor, whatever you do, don't answer it. Thank you for watching. If you love true horror stories, real accounts of the things that hide in silence, make sure to subscribe. Because next time, the sound you hear in the dark might not be just a story.